But let me focus just on, in the areas of theology, a lot is happening. Number one, biblical studies. A lot of research going on. We did this book on the child in the Bible, but many scholars now are just looking at all kinds of other books in the Bible. They're looking at the context in which the Bible was written, conceptions about children in the Greco-Roman world. A colleague of mine at the University of Oslo is doing a whole project on conceptions of children, including the Bible, from 0 to 800. A very big project, looking at Greco-Roman views, biblical views, and trying to see, and also to see what was the world of children in that time. So biblical studies, very hot topic. Church history, also very, very interesting. Like, what is the history of childhood? You know, our views of children change over time, right? Just as our views of men change over time, women change over time, we have certain constructions of who is a child, what's a child. So there's a real strong interest in church history and in history generally about histories of childhood and histories of the family. Or historical theology, that's like my first book, where you just look back at influential theologians. There's so much more to do about what they said about children, about our obligations to them, and what implications it would have for today. If we went back and really looked closely at Calvin, or we really looked closely at another figure very important in your own particular theological tradition. Systematic and contextual theology, also some work being done there. People are writing what are called theologies of childhood. In other words, very serious theological reflection and looking at it afresh. What is a child? And what are our obligations to them? And presenting a theology of that. Or others are doing, in systematic theology, maybe rethinking what they thought about central doctrines and practices in the church, and in the light of attention to children. So, for example, if I wrote a book on creation, and I was a systematic theologian, and I'd just written a book on creation, but I hadn't thought about children, biblical texts about children, the situation of children, and then I kind of revisit what I said about the doctrine of creation, it might change, right? Or like the doctrine of the church. I'm a systematic theologian. Ich habe über Eschatologie und Ekklesiologie geschrieben, right? So I just wrote my great book on the church. But maybe I could revisit it, go back, see what the Bible said about children in the early church. What was their role? I could look back, I'm a Lutheran theologian. I'll see what Luther said about children in the church, right? And I might look at what's going on in congregations today, what's going on in society today, and I might rewrite my book on the church, the doctrine of the church. So that's this area of systematic theology, where there's some rethinking, a disrupting of theology and categories we've had in the light of attention to children and childhood. And finally, then, of course, in ethics and practical theology. A lot of people now working in ethics on things like children's rights or children's responsibilities. What are adult responsibilities, what we owe them, but what are the responsibilities of children, not just their rights, but their responsibilities. A lot of interesting work going on in ethics. Also about like things like child soldiers, of course, child-headed households, issues of divorce, issues of remarriage, all those issues you presented to us so beautifully this morning. And then in practical theology in all areas, pastoral care, religious ed, youth and family ministry. So these areas all build on things they've done in the past, but it's a new area, a new emphasis on children and family. And I wanted to just also emphasize, I put this on the sheet, that these areas within theology also build on or are in conversation with growing scholarship in these other disciplines that I mentioned, in this interdisciplinary, growing, burgeoning field of childhood studies with people in history, in archaeology, in psychology, child development, sociology, law, legal status of children, and literature.